Folktales, a podcast that mixes historic research and tabletop role-playing settings. I'm your host, Timothy Ferguson. Time for a final visit to Kunz's Law of Precious Stones. Initially, I'd cut this into 2 episodes because I thought sapphires would have so much material attached to them they could stand alone. I'd expected them to be everywhere because they're common in fantasy stories. Also, I come from central Queensland, which has the largest sapphire fields in the southern hemisphere. They're cheap and popular here. It turns out there are no good sources of sapphire in mythic Europe. It's a mysterious stone that comes from the east. Mythic Europeans don't know that rubies and sapphires are colour variations of the same basic stone, corundum, and they don't really have a term for what we call fancies, which are corundums in other colours. The name is vaguely related to the planet Saturn through a string of etymology that mythic Europeans would not understand, and also to the blue colour of the stone. The Romans used to call modern lapis lazuli sapphirus, as noted in an earlier episode in this series. Corundum is exceptionally hard and is difficult to wear away, and this is why it's used in things like the movements in watches. Presumably House Veditus know this and uses artificial stones. Non-gemstone quality corundum is used to grind less durable gemstones down, so they may use it as an abrasive in their machines. A puzzle can be referred to as a corundum, but the word itself is post-game period. It's a latecomer to English from Tamil, so the desire to embrace the pun and have Guernicus Magi using it for Intelligo spells or Titalis Magi using it for disguises has to be resisted. Sapphire. Time for some Kunz. Sapphire is noted as a regal gem in Damagarian, who asserts that kings wore it about their necks as a powerful defence from harm. The stone preserved the wearer from envy and attracted divine favour. For royal use, sapphires were set in bracelets and necklaces. The sacred character of the stone was attested by the tradition that the law given to Moses on the Mount was engraved on tablets of sapphire. While we probably should translate here lapis lazuli instead of sapphire, all such passages were later understood as referring to the true sapphire, which is not found in pieces of the requisite size. In the 12th century, the Bishop of Reims lavishes encomiums upon the beautiful stone. It is quite natural that this writer should lay a special stress on the use of the sapphire for the adornment of rings, for it was in his time that it was beginning to be regarded as the stone most appropriate for ecclesiastical rings. The sapphire was like the pure sky. Mighty nature had endowed it with a great power, and it might be called sacred and the gem of gems. Fraud was banished from its presence, and necromancers honoured it more than any other stone, for it enabled them to hear and understand the obscurest of oracles. To step away from Kunz for the moment, the Pope who declared that all bishops' rings should be of gold with an unengraved sapphire was Innocent III, who died 3.5 years before the usual start of the game period. The traditional virtue of the sapphire as an antidote against poison is noted in Bartholomaeus Anglicus, who claims to have tested its power. Voicing his general belief that the sapphire was endowed with the power to influence spirits, Bartholomaeus says that the stone was a great favourite of those who practice necromancy, and he also adds that witches love well this stone, for they ween that they may work certain wonders by virtue of this stone. The asteria, or star sapphire, might be called a stone of destiny, as the 3 crossbars which traverse it are believed to represent faith, hope, and destiny. As the stone is moved, or the light changes, a living star appears. One of the most unique of talismanic stones, it is said to be so potent that it continues to exercise its good influence over the first wearer, even when it has passed into other hands. Among the rich gifts offered at the shrine of St. Erkenwald in Old St. Paul's was a sapphire given in 1391 by Richard Preston, a citizen and grocer of London. He stipulated that the stone should be kept at the shrine for the cure of diseases of the eye, and that proclamation should be made of its remedial virtues. The usefulness of the sapphire as an eye stone for the removal of all impurities or foreign bodies from the eye is noted by Albertus Magnus, who writes he's seen it employed for this purpose. He also adds that when a sapphire is used in this way, it should be dipped in cold water both before and after the operation. This was probably not so much to make the stone colder to the touch as to cleanse it, certainly a very necessary proceeding when the same stone was being used by many different persons suffering from contagious eye diseases. Richard Preston's sapphire appears to have been one of a class regarded as having special virtue to cure diseased eyes, as is shown by the existence of various other similar sapphires in different parts of Europe. It's not easy to determine the precise reason, if there be one, which rendered any single sapphire more useful than any other in that respect. An entry in the inventory of Charles V notes an oval oriental sapphire for touching the eyes, set in a band of gold. Possibly the fact that a particular gem of this kind was used remedially and not set for wear as an ornament may have been the only cause for belief in this special virtue. The proper method of applying a sapphire to cure plague boils is given at some length in Van Helmont. A gem of fine deep colour was selected and rubbed gently and slowly around the tumour. During and immediately after the operation, the patient would feel but little alleviation, but a good while after the removal of the stone, favourable symptoms would appear, provided the malady was not too far advanced. This Van Helmont attributes to magnetic force in the sapphire, by which means the absent gem continued to extract the pestilential virulency and contagious poison from the infected part. Previously published material includes bonuses Knowledge 2, Perdo Vim Against Spirits 2, versus Malign Corpus Spells 2, Healing 3, Reducing Anger 3. I'd also like to add Healing of Eyes or Sight of 5, and I think the whole necromancy angle should be stronger than 2, perhaps 5. Serpentines. Serpentines are a family of minerals. They have a sort of scaly appearance, hence the name, referring to the skin of a snake. They aren't precious, but they can be polished into stones which display this surface decoration. Brief quote from Kunz. Italian peasants of today believe that pebbles of green serpentine afford protection from the bites of venomous creatures. These stones are usually green, with streaks or veins of white, and the name was derived from the fancied resemblance to serpent skin. In addition to their prophylactic powers, if anyone has been bitten by such a creature, the stone, when applied to the wound, is said to draw out the poison. Here, as in the case of coral, the hand of man must not have shaped the amulet, it must be in a natural state. As a general rule, however, the belief that the touch of an iron instrument, such as the tool of a gem cutter, destroys the efficacy of the substance, is less firmly held in regard to stones than in reference to coral. Serpentine has previously been published with a material bonus versus infection and animal poison of 3. I think we might also give the stone a little fire resistance, because some serpentines naturally contain asbestos, which ties into the whole salamander mythology, so 2 perhaps. Turquoise. With turquoise we have an odd plot hook. For characters interested in the Magica Lithica, this stone, much as we know of it now, and have seen it in all kinds of role-playing games as a treasure, has no real role in medieval European jewellery prior to the game period. There are small sources for it in Europe, in Cornwall and in Saxony, but it only really comes to Europe in volume after the Crusades begin. Its name comes from the French and literally means the Turkish stone, although the Turks were just actually shipping it from Persia. It is also mined in Egypt and was used there for thousands of years, but the artisans of Kemet found several ways to make cheap artificial turquoise, which is more durable than real turquoise. And this means if you find a turquoise-like treasure from Egypt, these are likely to be durable ceramic imposters rather than real stones. Time for our last quote from Kunz. While there was a tendency to attribute the virtues originally described to one particular stone to others of the same or similar colour and appearance, certain stones were regarded as possessing special virtues not commonly attributed to others. A notable instance of this is the quality supposed to adhere to the turquoise. The stone was known in Egypt from an early period and is described in Pliny under the name of Calais. For Pliny, and for those who derived their information from him or the sources he used, turquoise participated only in the virtues assigned to all blue or greenish stones. From the 13th century, the name turquoise was first employed, and there we read that the stone possessed the power to protect the wearer from injury from falling, especially from horseback. Later, this covered falls from buildings or over a precipice. A 14th century authority, the Lapidaire of Sir John de Mandeville, states that the turquoise protected horses from ill effects resulting from drinking cold water when overheated by exertion, and it stated that the Turks often attached these stones to the bridles and frontlets of their horses as amulets. Probably the earliest notice of the peculiar superstition in regard to the turquoise, namely that it preserves the wearer from injury in case of falling, is contained in Volmar's 13th century Steinbuch, where we read, "Whoever owns the true turquoise set in gold will not injure any of his limbs when he falls, whether he be riding or walking, so long as he has the stone with him." A singular virtue ascribed to the turquoise was that of striking the hour correctly. If the stone was suspended from a thread held between the thumb and index finger in such a way that a slight vibration would make the stone strike against the side of a glass. The shape and material bonus table gives turquoise, or at least green turquoise, necromancy 4. I'd really like to give it an undiscovered but very high score for protecting from falling, positive 7 or so. As a stone that prevents you from being hurt by an involuntary dismount, and stops you colicking horses by giving them cold water after exercise, it seems a cavalier's friend. I'd note that the colic thing is effectively just folklore, by the way. To extend this, it might also serve to stop Bjorna Magi from injuring an ankle when in horse form, and be of similar assistance to marinitas mimicking centaurs. And that brings us to the end of these collected bits of folklore from Kunz. The series that will be replacing The Curious Lore of Precious Stones by Kunz, and will be debuting next week, is a deep dive into Lord Dunsany's The King of Elfland's Daughter, where I'll cut out the bits of folklore, start up the monsters. It won't be the entire book, just the bits that can be ransacked for Ars Magica. Your saga may vary.